Hello and welcome to the EURACTIV Agrifood Podcast. I'm Natasha Foote.
I'm Julia Dam.
And I'm Gerardo Fortuna.
And here's your weekly update on all things agriculture and food in the EU from EURACTIV's Agri-Food News team. Well, it's been a while since we've been here. How does it feel to be back in the podcast room? Well, not for you, Julia, but Gerardo, feeling good to be back? Feeling fresh?
It's quite warm, because of this, anti-sound panel, but...
We'll have to tweet out a picture of us back in the podcast studio. Well, so it's been we had a little break, a few little technical things we've been doing to try and make our podcast better, try and make it easier for you guys to access. But now we're back and raring to go.
Sounds like a threat. Now we're back. So basically, Tash or Julia or whoever want to say what happened in these 3 weeks. Now I'm joking.
Well, it'll be hard to cover actually because food has been, it's been an increasing theme. It's been increasingly important with the Ukraine war in the last few weeks. So, there's been lots of things going on, different fights, all talking about food security again and again. This has been really the main theme that we've seen in the last 3 weeks.
Indeed, food security is actually changing. Probably could lead to a shift in the paradigm. Let's see how it goes. Because it's actually a story that
shift in the paradigm.
Yeah.
Big claim from Gerardo.
Yeah, I don't know because it's something you actually reported last week.
Mm-hmm.
The hearing with Timmermans.
Yep. Yeah, I think the food security debate is kind of deepening some maybe already existing cracks between different factions of definitely within the commission, but definitely between kind of it's difficult to say because I don't want to say proponents of the Green Deal versus the farmers. This is a very old school kind of idea of being pitted against each other, food production versus being environmental, and I think it's a bit more complex than that. It's more nuanced than that, but there is definitely a lot of tension over the reaction to food security and how we should, how the EU should respond to the Ukraine war. And if I had to summarize it, we've seen quite an interesting conflict between, on the one hand, we've had Commissioner Janusz Wojciechowski, that's the agricultural commissioner, really still pushing on this production narrative. We have to produce more. This is the reaction. He's saying this, in his words, this is simply prudent, considering the fact that there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. We don't know where this war's going, how long it will be going on for. And
even if you saw today, he tweeted about his meeting with CropLife, so the pesticide lobby, plant protection products lobby. Let's use the whole the official term. And I could say that 4 months ago. Okay, this is an assumption, but. At the very top of, because he was basically listing all the topics that they touched on together with the head of this trade association. 4 months ago, he probably would have talked about the sustainability of the pesticide directive, actually regulation, revision, sustainable farming, and so on, while he basically listed food security, producing more and all this kind of stuff. So it's also changing the agenda of the DG Agri, Wojciechowski and so on, which actually is changing in a way that is quite liked by the farmers. We've seen recently also Copa Cogeca quite active. Copa Cogeca, the EU Farmers Association, was quite, I would say, not super happy in the past about the Agriculture Commissioner. Now they seem to be on the same page when it comes to food security. And but as you said, also Timmermans played a role in this.
Yeah, definitely. Vice President Franz Timmermans waded into the argument, as you said, last week. And basically, as I said, in the one corner we've got Commissioner Wojciechowski, in the other corner, really quite pitted against each other. Vice President Timmermans is basically calling this narrative that's been around food shortages and food insecurity. He's called this irresponsible and dishonest, which is, I mean, it's quite a strong kind of statement from him.
He also again tweeted the day after a very long thread.
Yeah.
With lots of number on why, to sustain basically his main argument. No.
Yeah, I mean, he's really wading in on the food security side of things, and he was saying that he also basically accused the critics of the farm to fork strategy as using war as a pretext to derail the EU's green farming ambitions. So it was like, yeah, a very strong statement from him. He's very against this production narrative. He's saying the fears around insecurity are unfounded. He was saying that people that are pretending we have a risk of food shortages in the EU, that's not the case. He was really going for it, and he was pushing much more on this idea of logistics and finance being the problem rather than the availability of food.
Yeah, which is basically the another core argument of the envy side of the food debate at EU level. So basically, for instance, it's food waste, not food production the problem. Again, it's as you said at the beginning,
it's this old thing that we kind of thought we'd moved through.
Yeah.
Or moved past. Obviously, food security is always important, but I feel like there was this kind of idea that we'd kind of moved past this. This direct conflict and me versus you and production versus environment. I feel like we'd kind of got over this.
And
this has pulled it all back up again. It's like,
at a certain point with the farm to fork, we said, okay, at least they agreed on an idea of sustainability. But now it's basically we're probably starting again from the scratch. Why I'm saying so? Okay, let's connect in the dots, which is basically the job of a journalist. So why it's important for me, what Timmermans, why the hearing was important in this debate, because it was basically asking the support of the Envy Committee to not lose ground,
to be his ally, in this fight,
in defending the farm to fork implementation. So this is the real message. Apart from again, this the bigger one is food security is not that a thing in Europe, which is actually true. I mean, it's in the sense that food availability is not a problem, but the real message is this one. So basically, it's let's defend the farm to fork
and be on my side. But I mean, really, they're gathering allies. It's like how can I say, food production versus food accessibility and environmental stuff. That's the old argument, and also envy versus agri is rearing its head again.
And another interesting aspect is what happened this week in Strasbourg with the Organic Action Plan. Okay, the Organic Action Plan is the Commission's ambition when it comes to organic farming. There was a reply to this ambition coming from the MEPs. It was an own initiative, so it's not an amendment to...
we don't need to lose our minds too much about this.
Yeah, but still, there was an interesting point, which was basically the main target of organic farming production,
which is
25% by 2030. Right?
Very good. Putting him on the spot.
Because I'm reading very good article on this. And I'm saying this because Natasha is covering organic agriculture since the organic action plan since the announcement of the farm to fork. But yeah, the 25% target disappeared from not disappeared, but it wasn't mentioned.
It wasn't mentioned. There was in the report. Green MEP put an amendment in. He wanted the amendment to the report to specifically, like an explicit mention to this 25% target, and
it was scrapped.
It didn't pass. So MEPs did not want this farm to fork target to be in this report. So in their stance on this organic action plan from the Commission, they don't want a mention of the target. They are more pushing on market-driven solutions, support for member states, for national action plans, with this idea of increasing production in line with demand.
And I will add a last thought. It's actually in one of the EURACTIV's briefs, the energy one, the green brief. It was a top story of this brief by our colleague Frederick Simon, who's the energy hub editor, and he was basically collecting the thoughts of the chair of the ENVI committee, Pascal Canfin. And he's basically fearing that the EPP, so the biggest political party in the European Parliament, could abandon the support to the Green Deal. Again, at the moment, it's a very complicated situation within the EPP. Sometimes they are split. They're not very stable in anything. But still, there's something happening in the parliament that could be a direct consequence of what's happening with the Ukraine war, and also with not only from the agriculture perspective, but also from energy, and the transition in general, transition toward a more sustainable way of producing stuff in Europe.
I feel like I've blinked and gone back to like 2020.
Yeah.
All these conversations that we thought
were
dead and buried are just, wow.
So there's Timmerman asking for support. There's this, let's say, not avoidance, I would say MEPs forgot about one of the, not the main, but a very important target in the Farm to Fork, which is the food component of the Green Deal, and also the EPP no longer so sure about the Green Deal implementation. So
it's been a big 3 weeks, basically, what we're saying.
yeah, indeed.
So continuing with the theme of food security, we actually spoke with Sarah Tabor, who is a crop scientist and also a consultant, and she's been taking a really deep dive into the current market situation in light of the Ukraine war. So Sarah had a lot of really interesting insights to share with us about the situation. We had to condense it down for the podcast, but here are the best bits from our conversation.
Yeah, and for instance, for Sarah, the issue of food security is also very personal.
Despite, being a highly educated person who's in the middle class now in the United States, I had a lot of experiences with food insecurity in my life. I could not get enough food. I could not afford it. And so to see people talking about food shortages and hunger as an issue of there's not enough food, well, I was very hungry in a country where we have far too much.
So according to Sarah, the real risk at the moment is panic.
I was able to figure out that a lot of the reporting and the panic, we do have some real supply chain problems, but the way they're being interpreted is completely off. And it's leading us to handle it in ways that are actually making the problem worse, and are going to potentially actually be the source of hunger for people in affected nations, as opposed to the food supply chain interruptions itself.
And she also broke down the facts and figures from Ukraine.
I think when people hear Ukraine provides 30% of the world's wheat exports, what they hear is Ukraine is the only place where you can grow 30% of the world's wheat. They get this impression that there's a limited supply of wheat in the world, that wheat can only grow in certain places, and Ukraine was it, and now it's out. And that is absolutely not the case. It is actually very, very easy to grow more wheat, because a lot of people in the crop world saw this conflict kind of brewing back in November, which is wheat planting season in a lot of the world. They actually started planting more wheat back then. So a lot of the supply chain shortfall was actually already being filled by the time the public realized this was a problem. There's actually a saying in the crop world, by the time your crop makes it into the news, it's time to stop planting. Because this kind of boom, bust, and then public panic cycle when the problem was actually already being solved is so common in agriculture. There's a saying about it, right? That's kind of cherry picking statistics to make it sound as dire as possible, which is a choice.
So according to Sarah, there's plenty of food to go around, but it's redistributing it to where it needs to be that's the biggest challenge.
The world supply, we have plenty. So India and Australia have both had bumper crops of wheat this year. They're both exporting right now. So those boats, instead of going to Ukraine, can go to India or Australia. However, instead of a week away from Lebanon, India is 2 weeks away, and Australia is a month or more away. So the same 1,000-ton ship can no longer haul as much, right? So the way that works is if it takes 2 weeks to get to Australia, so then a round trip is 4 weeks, then you can make 13 trips per year. So the same 1,000-ton ship can only bring 13,000 tons instead of 26,000 tons, right? And then if we have to go to Australia, that could be up to maybe a 2-month round trip. So now you can only make 6 trips per year. So the same 1,000-ton ship can only bring 6,000 tons to a country that's used to getting 26,000 tons out of that shipping capacity.
How to do this, though, is a huge challenge and varies from country to country.
So because each country's food supply is different, they all have a different port situation, they all have a different internal distribution, they all have different economies, different levels of internal inequality, different capacities to grow their own crops and to change how quickly they're growing a different mix of crops. That's different for every country. And so there is no one size fits all what governments should do, right? Because what one government where they can grow lots of food and they need to maybe switch to more staple crops. I think like Egypt still grows quite a bit of food, but they switched away from wheat. Historically, like Ukraine, they're a massive wheat exporter and have been for thousands of years. But in more recent years, they've switched to more high value crops like dates, figs, just like high value crops like that instead of wheat. So if you're Egypt, maybe you want to switch to growing more of your own wheat in country. They have some programs in place to do that. A place like Yemen, they don't have water. They're not going to be able to start growing their own crops. So for them, they're completely dependent on foreign aid, almost entirely. Like they do grow a small amount of wheat, but it's very limited to, I think, natural rainfall and some natural irrigation, or some installed irrigation. So a place like Yemen, even without the conflict that they have, which has wrecked their infrastructure, their ability to grow more food is still going to be limited. And then they have the infrastructure and conflict challenges on top of that. So a place like Yemen is in a very different situation from a place like Egypt.
So the take-home message, don't panic.
It's kind of funny to me that we actually do have a lot of pieces that are working the way they're supposed to and things that really did fall into place when they were needed. And we don't talk about that. And I don't know, like if we're talking about actually solving problems and like treating this food supply chain crunch as a problem that needs to be solved, we should be talking about the solutions that are already in place, how we can strengthen them and how we can replicate them elsewhere. But we're not. We're just running around screaming, oh my God, where's the food? When the lack of food isn't even the problem. So again, like kind of looking at critically as a supply chain problem rather than, oh my God, there's a shortage. This is just a lot more useful. And I think is going to help us from getting stuck into really unproductive cycles of panicking and then not doing anything.
So I thought we could start this week's Flavor of the Week off with a little riddle. Now, Gerard and Natasha already know what flavor we're talking about, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have posed a riddle to you, but we're going to do it kind of interactively. I'm going to say the riddle and then I'm going to
like to win, so...
Congrats if you...
Go with the riddle. We'll pretend that we don't know the answer.
And I'll leave like 3 seconds for the listeners to make up their own mind and then we'll reveal. So everyone ready? So I'm going to name some varieties of the food we're talking about, and you see if you can guess what the food actually is. So we have Laura, Cara, Charlotte, and we have one called Rooster. So I'm going to give 3 seconds for people to make up their minds. 3, 2, 1. And the big revelation is it's potatoes.
Potatoes.
Wow, surprise.
May I add another etymology?
You may not.
It's
very
no. It's very famous in Belgium. I never heard about it before. It is the Nicola or Nicola potato. Yeah. It's from 90. It entered in the French catalog in 1982, so it's quite recent.
Why do you know this?
Yeah, because I mean Nicola it's a very Italian name. So yeah, there's also Nicola, by the way, or Nicola, since we're talking about that, and they're super good for the Belgian fries. Sorry.
I see. Okay.
So yeah. Or maybe not. Now we're gonna receive a lot of complaints from the Belgians saying, "No, it's not true. We use the Nicola for potage and so." Okay, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually no coincidence that we're talking about potatoes this week, because they actually fit in quite nicely with what we talked about before, which is food security. Because potatoes are actually a key staple for ensuring food security, especially in developing countries, where potato consumption has actually increased significantly over the past decades. So, for example, according to a 2019 study, 50% of the world's food energy needs are provided by potatoes, rice, wheat, or maize. And as you already see, potatoes are the only non-cereal in this list. So we had rice, wheat, maize, all cereals. And potatoes are the only main staple that aren't a cereal. And actually, potatoes have the largest non-cereal food crop worldwide in terms of area.
And also, the United Nations and its Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, also highly recommend potatoes as a food security crop to feed a growing world population. One reason for this is their nutrient quality. Potatoes are a fat-free source of energy, and some researchers call them a one-stop shop for human nutrition, as they provide a wide range of nutrients. But while potatoes are on the rise to feed developing countries, they're actually less and less popular in the EU, and consumption is declining. Researchers say that some reason for this are that pasta and rice are on the rise, or rise.
Terrible.
No, it's actually very good. So are on the rise as competing major sources of carbohydrates, and the time it takes to prepare potatoes is putting people off. May I add something? The second break.
You always look to me for permission.
I know you don't really like my breaks.
Oh, what? I love them. Go on, you may add something.
Because I was 3 weeks ago. No, 3 weeks ago I was in Paris, and I was at this pretty street in the 11th arrondissement, which is actually a good part of the city.
Well, it's quite a brag, this, yeah.
I'm asking.
I was strolling through Paris.
I'm asking Tash because she used to live in a very fancy district of Paris. Yeah, and there was this Avenue Parmentier, no? Mm-hmm. And there was like a tiny introduction. Not introduction, I mean, they're basically presenting this character, agronomist who introduced the culture of potato.
Wow, that's a big claim.
The culture of potato, because I don't know if you know the story of this guy, Parmentier.
No. Here we go.
Parmentier was was an agronomist, no? Mm-hmm. And he got captured by the Prussian. Actually, the Prussian is not the Germans, but yeah, basically the modern German, like Julia could be a Prussian. And during the captivity, he found out all the good aspects of potatoes, the one that Julia listed before. So he didn't catch any disease. He was very well treated, and so on. And so it started to introduce this ingredient in the French diet, because there was a bit of stigma toward potatoes, because it was used for basically animal feed at the time. So I basically started some kind of fancy lunches and dinners with Benjamin Franklin.
Potato propaganda.
Yeah, like with the food influencer of that time. So he probably could have invited me.
If only he'd had Instagram.
Yeah. But it didn't work. It didn't work.
It didn't work?
No, it didn't work. So he basically got from the king some lands around Paris. And of course, he was growing potatoes. And he basically hired some guards, like basically the army, the French army, to guard on the potato crop. So people around will start thinking, okay, guys.
I was thinking it's valuable.
There's something valuable there. I want the thing. And he basically allowed the guards to be bribed. Like, okay, if they're gonna bribe to get what you're guarding, go ahead, take the bribe, whatever, no matter the amount and so on. And also, if you see some theft attempt, try not to be super, like, try not to do your job.
This sounds like the dream job.
Absolutely. That's why.
Guard it, but don't guard it well.
Yeah.
Take money for bribes.
Let's say a lot of your level of ethics, but
says a lot about my journalism.
Indeed, this is a very bad. Of course, she's joking. She's joking. No, so basically, Parmentier did a lot of stuff for potatoes. No,
and thank goodness for that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had aligot.
Indeed, and a lot
of. What do we do without aligot?
A lot of dishes.
Aligot, how do you say it? Yeah.
Isn't there even something called hachis parmentier?
Indeed.
Yes, you're right.
There's also a Parmentier potage. There are a lot of stuff. Because, guys, this guy introduced the potato culture in France. So
he basically made it a limited edition, and then people wanted it.
Indeed.
So smart.
He adopted. Indeed. It actually didn't work either. So it's basically...
Well, something worked, because...
No, something worked. It's probably like a book of recipes in the 19th century that was very famous in France and introduced the... But anyway, it was a nice attempt from Parmentier and...
Nice try, Parmentier.
Parmentier, yeah.
All right, well, let's switch over now and look at the production side. So potato production is actually highly concentrated in the EU. So the bulk of potatoes comes from just 5 member states. That's Germany, Poland, France, the Netherlands, and Belgium. Of course, we're very well known for our potato-based produce. And much like demand, EU potato production is also declining, and sharply, because between the years 2000 and 2020, the cultivated areas used to grow potatoes almost halved, which is actually really quite dramatic in 20 years. So anyway, but we had lots of numbers, lots of stories here, but let's wrap up with a fun fact. You might know that potatoes originally come from South America and were only brought to Europe after Europeans discovered them and then started to colonize the Americas. But did you know that during this early time, Europeans actually did not want potatoes to eat them? They were actually imported as ornamental plants because of their lush foliage. And they do have lush foliage, don't they?
No.
I am a fan of their foliage.
The potato, yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful foliage.
I also, Parmentier used to...
No, we're done now.
As a gift, gave some potato flowers to the king and the queen of France.
And that's all from us. And this week, like every week, the EURACTIV Agrifood podcast was produced by EURACTIV's Agri-Food news team. That's Gerardo Fortuna, Natasha Furt, and Julia Dam, with support of Evi Chiori.
And this podcast is also available on all major streaming platforms, including Apple, Amazon, Stitcher, and Spotify.
Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter so you don't miss the latest agriculture news from the EU. I'm Julia Dam. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.